Cool.
Welcome to Guerilla Sports Off Ice. Guerilla Sports Off Ice is brought to you by Trusted American Mortgage. Trusted American salary-based mortgage consultants want to help you get into a better interest rate and lower your monthly payments. Go to trustedamerican.com to see how much money they can save you today. Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hello, welcome to the show. Jesse Montano, Meghan Angley, Guerilla Sports Off Ice. And I don't know, Megan, anything going on today? Anything noteworthy, newsworthy to talk about?
I think there is.
I think you're right. I had a rundown for this show, and most of it just got thrown right out the window about 20 minutes ago. Breaking news, the Colorado Avalanche have traded Alexandar Georgiev to the San Jose Sharks in exchange for MacKenzie Blackwood. There's some other pieces that go along with that deal, Megan. We'll get into it. We're going to break it all down. We're going to talk about the swap of goaltenders, why San Jose made sense, what other pieces went along with it. I guess let me go quickly to what the entire breakdown is here. What was your reaction while I'm getting the full details pulled up? Your reaction to this deal when you saw it just at face value?
Roll the tape. When we've talked about how we have felt after the Wedgwood move, I think we've been consistent in saying the Avs are buying time.
Yes.
They are not done evaluating the goaltending position, but I expected it to be a bit more challenging to maneuver the cap based on what the return might be, except for if it's MacKenzie Blackwood. So this felt like an inevitable fate the Avs, I thought, would have to take a little bit more time to get to this point, but I'm really happy with the move. I have a few more thoughts on it, but while you're pulling it up, I guess I'll just go into it.
Well, here I've got it right here.
Okay.
So let me give you the full breakdown. So MacKenzie Blackwood coming to the Colorado Avalanche, goaltender, plus Givani Smith and a 2027 fifth round pick. Givani Smith, AHL player. We'll talk a little bit about him. Is this someone that we could potentially see called up? So Blackwood, Smith, and a 2027 fifth round pick coming to going to San Jose, in exchange. Hold on. I'm all backwards here. Blackwood, Smith, and a 2027 fifth round pick coming to Colorado, going to San Jose. Alexandar Georgiev, Nikolai Kovalenko, a 2025 fifth round pick, and a 2026 sixth round pick. Keep going.
I think a lot of people are unsurprised that this resulted in moving Georgiev, even on the heels of what was a good game against Detroit.
Yep.
And I look back to the Avs in seasons leading up to their 2022 Stanley Cup, and there was a lot of failure that was required before they could reach that point. And I think for Alexandar Georgiev, there's a lot of failure required for him to fully realize if he is or isn't an NHL starting goaltender. And the trouble is, the Avs are not in a position to allow a failure runway right now. They're gunning for another Stanley Cup.
Yep.
They can't afford to give that to Alexandar Georgiev. And I think San Jose is in a position to offer him that amount of opportunity to see if he can hack it in this league, and Colorado can't. I think failure is often viewed as a bad thing, but that's why I tee it up with the 22 Cup team required failure to get to that point too.
Mm-hmm.
The Avs just can't afford failure right now. And there was too much of a gamble with Georgiev in net, trying to see if he could be a starting goaltender for this team right now. And the truth is he can't. Not in Colorado, not right now, but maybe in San Jose.
I think San Jose makes so much sense for they had a goaltender that has been playing well to start this season. We're going to talk about MacKenzie Blackwood on this show and give a little bit of context to his career because it hasn't always been, he's kind of been projected as one of the next great goaltenders in this league. He hasn't quite gotten there at times, has played behind some not so great teams, is having a really strong year to start this season behind a pretty terrible San Jose Sharks team. So we're going to talk about all of that. But to your point, I think it makes a lot of sense just given the situation that San Jose is in, they've got Yaroslav Askarov right now playing in the American Hockey League. So they're fine with a goaltender like Georgiev, who can play at this level. Like, let's be clear about one thing. Alexandar Georgiev has more than shown he can play at the NHL level. It's the consistency. It's, can he handle that number one workload that has kind of always been in question? They're a fit for him in that they can kind of let that ride a little bit. Couple super chats here early. Miss Truly, so much wood. Yeah. Blackwood, Wedgwood, and Miles Wood. A lot of wood on this team right now. From Daniel Bentley, $5. Do they expect me to go back to work after this? It's chaos upstairs. Chloe is feeling all kinds of different things. But it's pretty chaotic going on upstairs right now. So we get it. We feel you. Overall, Megan, I really like this deal. I was worried when the details were starting to come out just a little bit about the fact that it was going to be a roster player, a pick, and we all figured that Georgiev was going to be part of it. But I was like, what's that roster player going to be? Because we knew the cost was going to be high. Megan, this came in at a lower overall cost than what I was expecting.
I think that's what makes Blackwood the perfect fit for a lot of reasons, including that he's been trending in the right direction with how he has started his season and a couple of the seasons that he's built here lately. And we've known there's been interest linked to him for some time, didn't know how much fire was behind that smoke.
Yep.
But going back to that trade deadline where Annunen was sick at morning skate, that was where there was some of that smoke before. So I look at that fit, but then the money component. When we talked about the Avs buying time, we knew it was because this had to have layers to it. It wasn't ever going to be some one-for-one swap. Georgiev's value just declined so much. You weren't going to get anything worthwhile in return just with Georgiev as the piece. I think when you look at what's in the depth pipeline for Colorado, you looking at Cal Ritchie, like that's a really strong asset that you don't want to part ways with. You're looking on the back end in a Barons, Malinsky, and I don't particularly want to part ways with any of those players.
Nope.
I don't want to part ways with Kovalenko either, but when I look at where they could probably spare, it's a highly skilled winger who I think has grit and upside that we were just beginning to see his fit in Colorado. He's a full-time NHLer right now. But I think that's where they could afford to lose him because I feel like that's the easiest position to replenish down the line if they need to. And I feel a little bit sad for losing on Kovalenko, but I do look at other areas of their depth that they had to consider, and I think they made the right choice.
I'm with you. I think they made the right choice. I think it was, again, for me, we were starting to see those flashes from Kovalenko. There was a lot that you were really starting to like about his game because, like, I'll be honest, at the start of this season, not that I was disappointed in what Kovalenko had brought. I was hoping he would just be able to jump in maybe a little bit quicker. And it felt like he was getting there, right? Like it felt like we had finally started to see a little bit of that from him. So it does make a little bit of a bummer, but I still saw a player there, Megan, for me at least, that had a pretty hard ceiling of what you were going to be able to get out of a guy like Nikolai Kovalenko. And while it may be a little bit disappointing, the other way to look at this is you just took a 6th round pick from 2017 and helped turn him into a new starting goalie for you.
And when I look at Kovalenko's upside, I think there was second-line winger potential for him, which is not something to get carried away with underestimating. But right now, the Avs kind of have an abundance of winger options for their second line in particular, especially when Jonathan Drouin gets healthy. You've got Ross Colton, who you're not sure what you're going to do with him exactly, brought here to be a center, but does really great on wing. I think that's what makes Covey expendable because of what the team needs right now.
We just had a comment up on the board. The Avs are in win now mode. You got to be aware of what's happening in the future, but that can't be what your primary focus is. Look, everyone was talking about the fact that from the start of the season, the Avs needed to figure something out in net. They needed to get better. They needed to get more consistent. They needed to get more reliable. I think, at least for right now, there's plenty of reasons for optimism in doing this. Let's talk about MacKenzie Blackwood, right? That's what everyone wants to know about. Blackwood has been a little bit of an up and down player in the NHL, at least in terms of what the hard results have been. 2nd round pick back in 2015. just another big guy, Megan. The Avs no longer have the short goalie problem they had with Grubauer, they had with Francouz, they had with Georgiev. 6'4" MacKenzie Blackwood, second round pick from 2015, has spent all of his time in the NHL with two teams. It was the New Jersey Devils for several years, going back to 2017, and then he spent all of last year and 19 games this year with the Sharks. Again, never really a super heavy workload outside of 2 seasons where you could say it was starter or 1A, 1B type of a workload. Back in 2019, 2020, played 47 games for the Devils with a .915 save percentage, finished that season. Then last year, 44 games for the last place Sharks, the worst team in modern NHL history, finishing with 47 points, Megan. Finished last year with an .899, 10 wins last year, 22 wins in the last season where he had over 40 starts. Your kind of baseline impressions of MacKenzie Blackwood, big goaltender that has shown serious flashes in the NHL, but maybe just hasn't quite taken that step to full-time bona fide starter.
I feel like goaltending can be a little trickier to predict season by season compared to other positions. And so I think it is important with a team like Colorado in win now mode to go with a goaltender who's winning right now, at least in terms of his individual stats. San Jose has been in a rough place. I think it's also probably refreshing, Colorado looking in on the situation that San Jose has been in, to see a goaltender able to separate his own game from the poor performance in front of him and still find success. I have to imagine that goes a long way with what Colorado's looking for right now. And I think that trending upward in goaltending is also a good thing. And coming to Colorado, he'll get some more support in front of him as well. I think even Wedgwood is benefiting from the returns on that, having started the year in Nashville, another team that's been struggling. Wedgwood, in the early returns, has played pretty well behind this Colorado Avalanche team. I think the same is true of Blackwood. That's going to get confusing. Wedgwood, Blackwood.
Yeah, seriously, no kidding. I'm just now figuring out how to say Scott instead of Scotch.
Scotch.
This definitely is, to me, Megan, an upside play, because this was part of the argument that we had been making over the last couple years, geez Louise, weeks, of, hey, MacKenzie Blackwood is exciting. He's playing really well. Is he a set and forget, no doubt upgrade over Alexandar Georgiev, or is he, more than a league average goalie? I think that's still, we're waiting to find out. But it does feel like for the first time in a while, there is some excitement about, like, they might have a younger goaltender who's still got a ways to go before he hits his ceiling. Does coming in and playing behind a cup contending team, pull anything else out of him? And look, you also were just at a point where you couldn't let it ride. Like, we've seen this management group do that several times over the last number of years with whether it be certain players, positions of need, whatever, and just saying, hey, look, we don't want to shake things up too much. We don't want to disrupt what's going on in that room too much. We're going to let it ride, and we're going to see how things shake out. We believe in our core. We believe in our team. We believe in our leadership. This was a situation, Megan, where I don't know if there was any amount of quality starts that Alexandar Georgiev could give you that would make you feel more confident. I think what the Avs are looking for here is, okay, let's say MacKenzie Blackwood is a league average starter. Can he come in and be league average 9 out of 10 nights? Great. That's all we want.
When you look at the risk the Avs are taking in net, going back to the risk they took with Georgiev, it was far greater. His numbers year by year in New York as a backup were trending in the wrong direction. With Blackwood, it's been trending in a better direction. He's been more of a true starter coming from San Jose. The experience makes it actually less of a gamble than Georgiev ever was. So it's, to me, obviously an upgrade in net. I think when we say the team is in win now mode, we don't just mean Stanley Cup aspirations. We also mean they need to make the playoffs.
Yes.
And that's what I think created the urgency around this. I think Justus Annunen would have met a different fate if the team had not struggled so much this year. all of it sort of is a culmination of the overall goaltending problems. And I think to your point, especially recently, they reached a breaking point. There was obvious frustration in the team, and it felt directly linked to goaltending and a lack of confidence. That meant they needed an answer for this sooner rather than later to ensure that they actually make the playoffs. And I'm glad they've been stringing together wins. But as we talked about, it felt like a magic trick in getting the best out of Georgiev, because Georgiev's good games are not the surprise to anybody. We knew he had the good games in him. It was the trust issue of, but when are we going to get a bad game? And how many are we going to get? How long are you going to be in that rut? And will you be able to get out of it in a 7-game series?
Well, and I actually want to even call on something that you pointed out. I believe it's Monday. It wasn't earlier this week. It's Monday today. It couldn't have been earlier this week. This is the start of the week. It was last week where you keyed in on the fact that Alexandar Georgiev seemed like, not that we hadn't seen him get frustrated at times in the past, but I would actually even go so far to say that, Megan, when he first got to Colorado, one of his hallmarks was how calm, cool, and collected he stayed. I remember even there was one time he yelled at a player who, from the other team who had kind of poked him after the whistle, and we were like up in the press box like, whoa, Alexandar Georgiev raising his voice. We just haven't seen that here. And it seemed like it was so easy for him to get off of his game, so easy for him to get frustrated, so easy for him to get inside of his own head. And it seemed very difficult for him to climb out of that. And that was one thing that I didn't know if that was going to get better. I didn't know if he had just kind of gotten to a point where anything that went wrong was going to just kind of derail what he was doing. Obviously, Alexandar Georgiev is no longer chasing a cup in San Jose, but maybe it's going to be a spot for him to be able to refine his game a bit here with a little bit less pressure. On the flip side of that, I just saw Frank Saravelli talking about this on Twitter. Now the question shifts. How does MacKenzie Blackwood handle the pressure of coming to a Stanley Cup contender? The one year that he was with New Jersey and they had a team that many people thought could make some noise, he kind of crumbled a little bit. It's been a few years. He's maybe matured a bit. Maybe his time in San Jose has done him good. What do you think about, is that a real thing that not we have to be worried about with MacKenzie Blackwood in particular, but is that a real thing for you? That do you think the pressure of playing for a cup contender can be positive or negative for MacKenzie Blackwood, in either direction? Can it be something that galvanizes him? Can it be something that makes him crumble?
I think that's the unpredictability of goaltending and why, compared to other positions, it's a little hard to get too caught up in what they've done in the past, because I look at the success of Adin Hill in Vegas. No one was expecting them to go that deep in their depth chart and have Adin Hill be not only a starting goaltender, but a Stanley Cup winning starting goaltender. Mm-hmm. And that's such, a unique example that I think it tampers my expectations, at least, to try and project what any goaltender will be until I start seeing them play. I think season by season goalies can write their own story. And I believe that to be true of Blackwood too. And Georgiev in San Jose, I think there's more room for him to fail there in a good way.
Yeah.
That sounds so negative.
No, but I know exactly what you mean.
But I look at what Will Smith and Celebrini are doing, and they're kind of giving these young players room to just have fun playing the game and decide what types of NHL players they want to be. And it stinks that it also comes with a little bit of failure. That's just what San Jose is doing right now. I'm not sure I agree with it, to be honest with you. This is a steal for Colorado. If I had an asset like Blackwood looking at the goalie market right now, I thought it was going to come at a much higher price point, at least in terms of assets being returned.
Yes.
Especially to have a goalie that's playing well on such a cheap contract. I have to imagine Mike Greer was getting tons of calls about Blackwood.
Right.
I don't know how he fell into Colorado's lap for, this is not against Nikolai Kovalenko.
No.
We loved him.
Nothing.
For nothing. Because this just made Colorado's goaltending even cheaper. You pointed this out. You sent me the Puckpedia link, so I'll let you talk about it.
Well, and word has come out. The Avs are retaining a little bit of money on Georgiev, a couple $100,000.
Okay,
so I think that will more or less even out the money. That hasn't updated yet on Puckpedia. But Megan, Alexandar Georgiev makes $3.5 million per year when you're talking full boat salary. For MacKenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood, right now the Avs are paying $3.8. So not only in 10 days did they completely overhaul organizationally their goaltending depth chart, they shed money in the process. And like you said, it's not that Nikolai Kovalenko was bad. But when I saw that it was MacKenzie Blackwood, I go upstairs and ask the guys. I was like, oh no. Oh boy, what did they just have to pay to get this done? I told him, I said, Georgiev's in the deal. No question.
All right.
But I said, I mean, are we talking Sam Malinsky in a first here? I mean, that's really what was kind of going through my mind because of what we saw it cost for them to get Scott Wedgwood, a backup goalie, and an additional pick. So I'm with you in saying, well, I'm sure the Sharks are taking advantage of the fact that they have one of the few goaltenders out there that's actually a realistic target. Isn't a guy like John Gibson who's making an inflated salary that you'd really have to find a way to get that. I said, oh my gosh, what was the cost on this? And really to find out that it's some pick swaps kind of, down the road a little bit. You get an AHL player back. And again, when you see what Ivan has done, when you see what Nikita Prishepov has done, it maybe just took some of the importance off of having a guy like Nikolai Kovalenko in the bottom of your lineup. And I'm honestly, Megan, I think this is an outstanding bit of business here for Chris MacFarland and the Avalanche. We were talking, recently, and a lot of folks have been in our mentions about Chris MacFarland and all that. I think he's been a masterclass on getting this goalie situation turned over. I think you got two guys now that you can feel reasonably comfortable with moving forward. And we're done talking about it. You know what I mean? Like we're done talking about what are they doing in net. This is it. I think you feel good. You've got a young guy who you hope can shoulder the load, and you've got a veteran backup guy who just wants to be part of the team and just wants to help them win and has done that so far. In the 3 games that he's played, he's helped them win games. He's helped keep them in position to win. And I imagine Wedgwood and Blackwood are going to form a pretty tight bond pretty quickly, knowing like, hey, we were the guys they trusted to bring in.
I think it's important to punctuate that Blackwood is younger than Georgiev
by
a little bit. But when Georgiev arrived in Colorado, that was sort of how we portrayed him, a young goaltender looking for opportunity to become a starter in this league. Blackwood, even younger, has proven that he can be a starter a little bit more, bigger sample size in San Jose. I think we can still then talk about the upside that's been untapped there for Blackwood.
Yes, I completely agree. That's the part of this that I'm looking at. And again, part of the reason why I was so surprised at what it cost isn't because of what Blackwood's numbers have been so overwhelmingly as a starter, but because of the upside. And because of the fact that it does feel like MacKenzie Blackwood's best games are ahead of him. I think this was not only a trade that you feel better about. I'm going to stop shy of saying, well, the Avs got unequivocally better in net today because MacKenzie Blackwood does still have a little bit to prove. He's been playing really well this season, but you've given yourself a lot of upside, and I think you've given yourself something to be excited about and something to dream on a little bit in net. We just had a comment come through that said, so they're hoping Blackwood, this is already tough.
I know.
Blackwood, Wedgwood, this is already tough. So they're hoping Blackwood can be Kemper 2.0. 100%. 100%. That's what you're looking for here. Can you get MacKenzie Blackwood to be above league average, just above league average, and play behind a team that you hope once they get fully healthy can help you make a difference, can help you go on a run, can help you hang another banner down at Ball Arena. Now, the only downside to this maybe of what we're talking about, him still having some upside here and some potential, no contract past this season. We'll see if that's something Chris MacFarland gets to work on right away, maybe trying to get him 1 or 2 years more here in Denver, but that's a problem for later, Chris MacFarland. I think this is a really nice bit of business for the exact reason you laid out. There's potential.
I think someone was in the chat, and actually Chloe might have said this at one point, that we don't always need to know what the front office is thinking at every minute. And I think it was important to have a little trust in the front office. Following the Wedgwood trade, I think people were dissatisfied because that didn't generate much enthusiasm. It felt like this was still so unresolved, but he wasn't finished. And so I think we owe Chris McFarland an apology. I'm just kidding. We still need to see how this plays out. But I do think there's a lot of credit due to the front office, because even just on the heels of the Wedgwood trade, this team has pulled together some wins, maybe even some that they didn't deserve, like the Buffalo game that they came back from. And I think that it's a morale boost.
Yes.
And I am excited to see what this does for the team now, even feeling more complete at this position.
I feel like the confidence and the energy level are up around the team. Like, I just feel like you said, we hear GMs talk about this all the time of, teams that maybe overachieve, or you look at the Minnesota Wild, right? Way outplaying expectations so far this season. So the GM goes out and makes a trade, brings in, Russian defenseman from Columbus. Why is his name? Juracek. They bring in a defenseman to help make the team better. It's a reward for how they're playing. This, to me, has to feel like, for those players, a situation where they've gone out and played their asses off. And like what Jared Bednar talked to us about, taking pride in the results that they've gotten to this point in the season because of the obstacles that they've faced. The Wedgwood deal and now this deal with Blackwood, to me, it's we see how hard you guys are playing. We see what you guys are doing. We're going to help you out. We're going to throw you guys a bone here, and I feel like the players have responded.
All in, like the deadline last year. And I like someone in the chat commented that they're really glad to see this happen now before the deadline, because the value of Blackwood probably would have only gone up around then. And so to get this done before the deadline, kind of jump ahead of everybody, I think is also going to be really good business. And we might not even be able to fully appreciate it until the deadline, when people are desperate for goalies and the options are grim.
Okay. The price is the thing I just keep coming back to, and we'll talk more about it here in a second. We got another super chat here, Megan. This one from Drew Lowensbury. Hey, there we go. Nice. Love that.
Hey, Drew.
So do they take a chance now and try to re-sign Blackwood to an extension in case he goes off and at the end of the year ask for a big raise? If he does off someone, i.e. if he does, someone, i.e. Edmonton, will give him a lot in free agency. Well, look, this is what we talked about with Alexandar Georgiev as well, kind of going through this season, was Georgiev's in a funny spot, because we had said this was probably Georgie's last year with the Avs, whether he played poorly or played really well. Either they weren't going to bring him back or they weren't going to pay him. And I think they'll probably try to get Blackwood on 1 or 2 years. I think they'll try to keep him here in Colorado while you wait for Ilya Nabokov to be ready over in the KHL. You've kind of set yourself up now with Wedgwood being here next year. You can bring Blackwood back for a year or two. You put yourself in a really nice position to let Nabokov develop the way that you want him to, take his time, and then you can bring him over. Any thoughts on this?
I was just curious if Edmonton could afford to even offer him big money in free agency, but I was pulling up their cap-friendly out of curiosity, just because I think that'll be the question: which team can dole out the money? And I think it's going to be teams less likely to compete for Stanley Cup. And I have to imagine when MacKenzie Blackwood gets a taste of playing for a team on the brink of winning, he might change his priorities. Yep. And Mikko Rantanen, I know this maybe isn't the best timing of it because he still hasn't signed his extension, but he talked about how winning a Stanley Cup changes things around what motivates you to stay in a place and continue winning with the people you've grown close to. And I'll wait and see if that kind of effect is going to take place with Blackwood.
Yep. Quick, hear this comment talking about the Avs wanting Nabokov to come over at the end of the year. Yes, I'm sure they would like that, but our good buddy Evan Rowell has reported that there's a chance Nabokov gets a new 1-year deal to stay in the KHL a year longer. So we're keeping an eye on that. Real quickly, I wore my Spider-Man hoodie today. This is like the 5th person who has said, like, oh, what are those, your Spider-Man pajamas?
There's something about the stitching. And the material does look a little pajama.
Like, I put on my Spider-Man hoodie today, put it on my jacket over top, and I was like, maybe we'll get a couple people, someone will say something about my hoodie, and like everyone upstairs, like, are those just pajamas? Like, it's a hoodie. And now here I am looking like I'm in
Did it come with
pajamas.
matching pants?
No, and that's exactly what Andy asked. That's exactly what Andy asked upstairs. She says, did you have the pants that match with it? No, I don't. Maybe I'll get them though. Oh, Stacy says it's the light blue. Hey, thanks, Jay. Jay says I look lovely. All of you. I could see it being the light blue. That makes sense.
It is a very pajama blue.
It's a pajama blue, and I won't even doubt that. I won't even turn that down. But this has not been the response I was expecting for this hoodie today. I'll say that.
Cool Spider-Man hoodie.
Yeah, like, whoa, nice, sick Spidey hoodie, dope. Nope. Or those Spider-Man pajamas is what I've gotten all day long. And you know what? Maybe they are pajamas now. Maybe I'm the comfiest one in the office. Who knows? I want to just go back real quick to the cost, just to put a bow on it, relative to what I was expecting and relative to the goalie market that was out there. I wanted to go back to this point because I felt like I kind of glossed over the point you made about revisiting this cost come trade deadline time, because the Avalanche are not the only team out there looking to solve a goaltending issue. The Edmonton Oilers, for example, as we just talked about in the chat, are another team that feels like they've got a good chance, but are looking for goaltending. There's teams all over the place who are looking to fill in these small little gaps. I'm sure there would have been plenty of takers for MacKenzie Blackwood come trade deadline. So the Avs being able to get ahead of that market and bring in probably who would have been the most coveted goaltender had he kept playing somewhere in this range. I just think is an impressive bit of business for what you were able to talk them into in terms of getting MacKenzie Blackwood here. Now you do always stop and ask the question a little bit like, all right, well, what does San Jose know that they were willing to part ways with him for this cost? But I do just think that Chris McFarland found the right situation, found a team that could take Alexandar Georgiev and his contract back, had minutes for him. And I just think they found a fit that made sense. And for the Sharks, they get a roster player who Kovalenko's probably going to have a decent sized role with them. I feel like this is one of those trades where everybody's probably feeling pretty good about what they got.
I think Colorado's feeling a little better.
I agree with you. I was trying to be diplomatic.
I have to wonder too if MacKenzie Blackwood had any say in wanting to find a different environment to play in. That's purely speculation. But I have seen some people ask about what we're getting in Giovanni Smith, and I did want to talk about him just very briefly. There's not a lot to say, just to be clear. I think that he is more of an American League player, but he has recently cleared waivers on San Jose's behalf. So there's some flexibility. And if the Avs wanted to get a look at him, and I think San Jose's interest in him initially was the grit and sandpaper in his game. I think that's something that Colorado doesn't mind loading up on and having as an option in their back pocket to get a little tougher as needed, and Giovanni Smith would bring that either to the Colorado Eagles or to the Colorado Avalanche. Both can benefit from it too. They're also trying to piece together their lineup in Loveland. They've been dealing with some injuries up and down the lineup as well. So they've also been navigating the veteran rule, and he would not be considered a vet. So it would be easy to get him in a lineup nightly basis in Loveland as needed, bring sandpaper, so fits that identity under Schneekloth really well.
Also sounds like you're describing a little bit of a Jared Bednar guy.
He's totally a Jared Bednar guy. Pretty high penalty minutes, but I think that he would be easy to use in a depth role because of what he does well. I think even San Jose, though, was finding it hard to justify his minutes because he wasn't really adding. And so it doesn't have to be just production, just to be clear. So I think that's where his time in San Jose kind of got expendable. And so, yeah, it's pretty meat and potatoes guy, pretty simple, but Avs can use a guy like that at times. So it makes sense why they have interest in him.
It makes sense why they have interest in him. And I want to talk about Kovalenko because we had a comment come through in the chat here that I want to talk about and just get your take on what we saw from Kovalenko, what he brought over the last handful of months, and why him being part of this deal I can see why people are disappointed, but why it ultimately makes sense. I do first want to remind you guys about our brand new partners over at 7 Brew Coffee. 7 Brew isn't your average coffee shop. It's a one-of-a-kind drive-through and walk-up experience that is redefining your morning and afternoon energy boost. From rich, bold coffee to refreshing energy drinks, real fruit smoothies, tea, and more, 7 Brew has something for everyone. As I was telling you last week, Megan, even me, who's not a huge coffee guy, we've gone up there, tried it out. We're actually going to get to stop over there again tomorrow, so you'll get to try 7 Brew out tomorrow, Megan. 7 Brew has something for everyone with over 20,000 flavor combinations. The possibilities are literally endless. You can create a drink that's as unique as you are, whether you prefer sweet or strong, iced or hot. They put the power of drink making in your hands at 7 Brew. The fully customizable menu is just the beginning. They believe in cultivating kindness with every cup, and their fast and friendly brew crew is ready to serve you with a smile. Their newest location is in Firestone, Colorado. 7 Brew is more convenient than ever. Drive through today and experience the coffee revolution. We will experience that coffee revolution tomorrow, Megan, as we are heading up north. Let's talk about Kovalenko. The question that came through in the chat: do you guys think Kovalenko underperformed based on the hype around him coming over? I would actually argue that he probably overperformed my expectations. To me, this was a guy that I had fully tempered my expectations, saying bottom 6 guy, he'll play in your third and fourth line, be a nice contributor here and there, plays with some grit, adds in some skill. I was never expecting him to jump off the ice. I thought he was good in his time in Colorado, but I also get why he was a guy that was expendable.
Well, it's easier to replace wingers than it is a centerman prospect. So Ivan Calrici already makes that a little bit harder of a decision. And right shot defenseman in Sam Malinsky, who we talked about. And that's not to say that his name was ever in question. It's just in looking at what they might have considered moving on from, it does feel like the only piece that they could spare at this time. And I was pretty hard on Covey. I kind of based my projection for him this year on what I saw in the playoffs. And I wasn't sure that he was ready to understand the game at the NHL speed just yet, and thought he might need a little bit of time in the American League to start the year. Mm-hmm. So he exceeded my expectations. The player that I saw coming out of camp preseason, he could hang with the top 6 in Colorado and also find a little bit of a rhythm in a depth role. I think people are a little hard on him in the chat. You know, the production didn't quite pop in maybe this most recent stretch, but I still felt like he was doing a lot of things well and adapting to the game pretty quickly, given so few NHL games to his name. You know, just getting dropped into the playoffs, that was really our only sample size before this. But when I say second line upside, that's a future goal. You know, for sure. He wouldn't, with the injuries on this team, he wouldn't have been in that conversation. And so he did need to figure things out then on a third or fourth line. How are you going to make an impact on a nightly basis? And I still think he was trying to find a way to get loud, as Jared Bednar would say. He did a lot of things well, though. I think his work ethic was exactly where it needed to be. And that's why I still view this as a great prospect. And when I talk about having room to fail for Georgiev and what they're doing with Smith and Celebrini, I could see that being something that benefits Covey in San Jose too. I
mean, he's got some guys, like he can be part of that core there, you know, like he can be part of that group there with those guys. Puckpedia did just publish this. The Avs, at the end of it all, the Avs pick up $670K worth of cap space. So there you go. Not bad. Not bad for the Avs. To make this move, you presumably get a little bit more reliable in net, and you get a little bit of extra money. Not a ton, not, you know, nothing like, oh, let's go spend it and bring a player in. But you get a little bit of breathing room there. There was something you were just mentioning with Kovalenko that I wanted to hit on, and I can't remember. So we'll keep going here. There was a comment that came through in the chat. I'll see if I can remember what it was that we were talking about with or that you were saying about Kovalenko that made me want to talk about it. Let's talk about Georgiev and his time here in Colorado. His first season, I think, was good. And I think everybody was excited at his potential and what he was able to do for the Avs. But it really was just such a roller coaster for the year and a half after that. It was some really high highs and some really bad, really low lows in terms of the actual performance. How will you remember Alexandar Georgiev's time in Colorado?
It is a roller coaster.
When Megan pauses with that smile, she's trying to think of the nicest possible way to say something. And it's one of my favorite things about you. You're never just going to like dump all over somebody, but you always give that little like, hold on, how do I make this nice?
I want to make it nice because my dealings with Georgiev 1v1, so nice.
Fantastic. Great
Patient, thoughtful, honest. You could see when he maybe didn't love a question,
guy.
and he could let you know it too, but he would still try to give a thoughtful answer if he could see that the intent behind it wasn't meant to be insulting or bad. And I liked a lot of things then about the 1v1 media to player relationship. But in evaluating his play in Colorado, I get frustrated with Georgiev because I think that it's still unclear to me if he could be an NHL starter. It is clear to me he couldn't be a starter in Colorado.
Yep.
I came to that conclusion this season. And the reason it's frustrating is because there's this skill upside that still exists in this goaltender. It's the mental side of the game that became frustrating because he couldn't figure it out. And he seems like such a thoughtful person. I just couldn't understand why he couldn't figure it out. I think you have mentioned before you were told that he had a little Nathan MacKinnon in him.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that assessment.
Yeah.
And the difference we've talked about is Nathan MacKinnon can channel his frustration boiling over into games, into something productive, whereas Georgiev never got better. When he let the game slip away from him by getting frustrated, he'd get angry, and it looked like he would blame others around him. That's the part of Georgiev that frustrates me. It's not to say I won't miss that specifically, and I hope he figures it out because it's going to be necessary if he does want to become a starting goaltender in this league. But it's difficult to talk about. There were lots of highs and lows in that title defense season. They needed some highs.
Yeah.
So he could be a bright spot at times, but I just think it was clear this team needed something different.
I remember what I was going to bring up with Kovalenko. You were talking about how he could have benefited from some AHL time with this group, with the Avs. I think he's going to get a good look in San Jose. I think he's going to get some good minutes. But there was that alleged reported AHL out clause in his contract with the Avs that if the Avs sent him to the American Hockey League for I don't know.
We never knew the total.
We don't know what the actual agreement was, but there was allegedly some agreement in Nikolai Kovalenko's deal that if the Avs reassigned him to the American Hockey League for X number of days, weeks, or games, that he could opt out of his contract and go back to the KHL. So it did just limit a little bit of the Avs' flexibility with what they could do with him. You don't have that problem anymore. Not that I'm saying he needed time in the AHL, but if you felt maybe at the beginning of the season he could have benefited from a game or two, there was just maybe some reluctancy to do so. So that was what I wanted to mention with him. I agree with everything you said about about Georgiev and his time here and being. I was immediately bummed. I have some great conversations with Georgie in the room, just not on the record or anything like that, but just talking with him. He was always a guy. I'm a big gearhead. I love, I guess gearhead is really used for like cars. I like hockey equipment. He was always willing to talk about his stuff, just kind of sit there and chat. Super nice guy, super soft spoken. So like, I was a little bummed. Like when I first saw that he was gone, I was like, oh damn, won't get to have another conversation with him, not until he comes back with San Jose. So on the non-hockey side, that's what I'll remember of him. But unfortunately, even in the time where he was that first season at his best, it felt inconsistent at best.
When he hit Sam Malinsky, I knew I had to reevaluate my opinion on Alexandar Georgiev. You don't hate your teammates?
Yeah.
Well, he has. Moving on.
Megan, let's talk about that for a minute. For people that don't remember, there was a game last year. I don't remember who it was against, Sam Malinsky was in front of the net, and there was a play that kind of bounced around right in front, and the puck ended up in the back of the net. And Alexandar Georgiev clearly felt like it was Sam Malinsky's fault. And the puck hit the back of the net. Georgie looked in the back, looked up, and whacked Sam Malinsky on the shins. We asked Sam about it after the game, and Sam gave a very diplomatic, like, I got to be better. I can't be making those mistakes, da-da-da-da-da. We asked Jared Bednar about it, and he was not happy, did not approve. A couple days later, when we brought it up, Jared Bednar talked to him, UC Parkala talked to him, and Chris McFarland talked to him about that is not how things operate in the NHL, and especially not with this team here. And that was the first time that I had a little bit of like, uh-oh. Does this guy not get along with the guys in the room? Is he not bought into this culture and the team first? That I think was maybe one of the first warning signs of, is this a viable option long-term? There seemed to be a lot of disagreements between Alexandar Georgiev and the players in front of him.
And I think sometimes the concern around the relationships with the players could be overblown. I don't think he had no friends in that room. I even think, because there was another incident where he was yelling at Mikko on the ice.
Yep.
I actually think Mikko was one of the players that did get along with him. And so they had that relationship where they could bark at each other and be kind of mean. That's what makes me upset about the Malinsky thing. That was your rookie defenseman just getting into some of his first ever NHL games. Cale Makar has made mistakes like that, and you've never seen Georgiev pull that kind of move. So I didn't like that he was intentionally like preying upon Malinsky's inexperience.
Premeditated. It was a premeditated
evil.
Outbreak.
It was evil. I'm just kidding. I'm so sorry.
But you know, in all seriousness, we all are familiar with the story from New York that he punched Tony DeAngelo in the face. Now, Tony DeAngelo isn't exactly everyone's favorite hockey player. So I think everyone kind of wrote that off as like, he was standing up to a guy who, you know, was causing problems. But when you did see some of that disagreeing behavior here in Colorado, it did just kind of beg the question of, is this guy confrontational?
I just feel like he would assign blame elsewhere. That's why when he got pulled, I want to say it's the Buffalo game, and he's throwing a tantrum on the bench. I'm like, who are you mad at right now? Because it did seem like when things would go sideways, he would point fingers in for his frustration, and it didn't feel like it was, I'm mad about my own game. It felt more like blaming others, and that's not a way to go. Because I even think with the Tony D thing, I think Tony D made a snide comment about him not making a save. And so I don't think it was over his bigotry that Georgiev punched him. I think it was over his performance, and accountability would have gone a long way, I think, with Georgiev, and I don't know that he ever figured it out, because I think his emotions, because I think if you gave Georgiev a night to sleep on it, he would probably take more ownership of his game. But in the immediate, he struggled to just immediately take accountability. He would start pointing fingers, and I think that just breeds a toxic environment. I don't think the whole room was toxic.
No.
I don't think Georgiev was entirely toxic.
But look, like it was obvious, Megan. Like it was obvious that there was something there with Georgie that just didn't feel right this year, at least. Nathan MacKinnon made that comment in Tampa. The pucks were going in, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. I do just think that the up and down play. The reason Nathan MacKinnon gets away with being a little prickly with some of his teammates and barking at guys is because he's the reigning MVP and he goes out there and puts up 100-point seasons. Feels like Alexandar Georgiev was constantly riding the roller coaster. And then right when he was here was when he was the most vocally yelling at people. You know what I mean? And that did seem to be like a little bit of a problem. Again, I don't think guys hated him necessarily, but it did seem like there was just a little bit of a disconnect between that type of mentality and the rest of the team and the way they interacted. And I do have to imagine that there's probably some energy around, and I don't think they're practicing today, but there's probably some energy around that room. of like, let's go. They brought in the guy. Let's go do this.
2 tendies.
Two tendies.
Still 2 tendies, 60, 4 lines all year.
All year. And I think they're probably feeling pretty good. Comment here in the chat. Does this make the Avs immediately better, or does it take some time for the new goaltenders to acclimate? Look, I just think this makes them more confident immediately. And I think this gives them a guy in net who you are thinking is going to be more consistent. So I don't necessarily know if you're like, yep, they're better today. But I think there's probably more confidence in that room. I think there's probably more energy in that room. And there's some optimism. There's some real optimism, I think, given that you got a guy that has shown flashes of being very good in this league and has been waiting to kind of take that next step. He's going to get another chance with a contender here, and I think they're probably excited about that. Do you have any thoughts on would you consider them better right now than when you woke up?
100%. And they just played one of their best defensive games of the year in front of Scott Wedgwood on the second game in a back-to-back against the New Jersey Devils. So I think that is part of it too, is like the front office looked at it and said, okay, he's given new life to this team. They're playing stronger defensively in front of this goaltender. If they can continue to play strong defensively in front of Blackwood, it should be an easier adjustment. It's not to say he doesn't have things to take care of on his own end, and I think an adjustment is realistic, but I think the team's in a good spot in terms of morale to galvanize and play strong in front of Blackwood as well.
I'm with you. Do you have any thoughts on what we were talking about earlier about should they try to get him signed for another year or two to give you some time on the Nabokov thing, or are you in the camp of get Ilya over here as quick as possible? The future is now.
Young goalies are hard to predict.
Yep.
I don't want to say either way just yet. I don't want to see Nabokov sign an extension, though, in the KHL just yet. So I want for the Avs to see what they have in Blackwood first. They have Wedgwood as a backup through this next season. But I don't think they need to be rushing young goaltenders to try and be a starting goaltender. That feels premature. That feels ill-advised. I'm not a goalie expert. I don't know that I'd recommend it, even though I believe he is the future of the Avs goaltending.
Having a very good year this year in the KHL. And look, so here's the part. You said 100% without question that the Avs are better right now than they were when you woke up this morning. By advanced metrics, Megan, not even advanced metrics, by regular metrics, Alexandar Georgiev was among the league's worst this season. There's no way to split that, sugarcoat it, whatever. You look at a lot of different models, he was the worst goaltender in the NHL this year. So it's hard to look at that and not feel like this is an improvement.
100%. Brechton's right also. If he's willing to come over and play in the American League a little bit, get him adjusted to North American ice, he'll have his share of starts as much as he wants.
Mm-hmm.
This is sad. I think it was good for Justus Saarinen, and I think it would be good for him too if Nabokov would be agreeable to it.
And I do wonder, because the KHL season runs a little bit ahead of the NHL season, so they're usually done quite a bit earlier, especially if you don't run to the finals. It would be interesting to see if he would be willing to come over and play the last dozen or so games with the Eagles.
I'd love it.
Get a full summer of off-season training, and just really kind of thrust him into that. Yeah, you're one of the top goaltending prospects in the NHL. Start putting him in line for a call-up if something were to happen. But I think no matter what, no matter how you look at it, whether you think they're outright better, Blackwood's a clear upgrade on Georgiev or not, however you want to look at it, there's no way you don't feel better if you're the Colorado Avalanche today than you did when you went to bed last night. Even after a really good win, you've got to be feeling a little bit more excited about your situation in net. And like I said off the top, you can now put this to bed. You don't have to talk about it in the run-up to the deadline anymore. You don't have to stress about, can Alexandar Georgiev, what's he going to do tonight? It's over. You made your moves. You picked up a little bit of cap space in the process. Bummer to see Nikolai Kovalenko go out, but ultimately, I think this is a net positive for the Avs in a big, big way. And it's because of the play from some of the other guys that we've seen earlier this season, Ivan, Nikita Prishepov, even Matt Steinberg in the games that he was able to give the Avs before he got suspended, and then subsequently hurt down in the AHL, I think it just put you in a situation where you could look at Kovalenko and say, if that's what it takes to get this over the finish line, we're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I do feel a lot better about this team. This comment from Jamie. Every goal scored resulted in heads thrown back, hands up, eyes rolling. AG leaving is an overall positive for the team. Feels sad to say it, but the body language from the players was obviously frustrated.
Yeah.
It did feel like that breaking point was absolutely reached this year.
Also from Jamie here, team sports are 1,000% trust, and there was none of that with him in net. It did just feel, and you and I even keyed in on a goal from earlier in this week where Calvin DeHaan kind of got caught in no man's land, because you could tell he went to do the right thing and then kind of panicked and was like, oh, wait, no, I can't let them shoot. And you ended up kind of covering nobody, and it led to an easy goal against, I believe it was in the Buffalo game. And that to me is a sign of a lack of trust that your goaltender is going to make a stop. And it didn't feel like they were playing that way with Scott Wedgwood. I argued earlier in the week, not argued with you, argued.
I cried. He hit me.
Stop. Argued on a show. Oh my gosh. Oh, this is going to be the last podcast I'm ever allowed to do.
That's bad.
First jammies, now Megan's out here spreading fake news. I had argued earlier in the week with you on the show that I don't think that teams go into games like, oh, this goalie's playing, we're going to play a certain way. But I do believe that over the course of a game, given how a goaltender is playing, can absolutely impact the way that you are.
I'm like a little worried.
The whole time I'm talking to her, she's just trying not to laugh. I do think over the course of a game, if a goaltender is not coming up with some of those easy saves, it can make it can wane that trust, and I do think that can impact the way that a team plays. And I do think that to the point that the comment made that you brought up, you could see that in the physical body language. Pucks were hitting the back of the net, a lot of palms going up, a lot of, very kind of like silent skating away. You could see the look in the eyes. And I just think that going away is going to help.
We do have Chris McFarland at 3:00.
Yep, I saw that. Did we get the email finally?
Yes.
Okay, because I saw the text and I hadn't gotten the email yet. Yes, so in about 30 minutes we will be hearing from Chris McFarland. Unfortunately, we won't be able to carry that live on the show. Otherwise, I'd say we'll just hang out until that happens. Cool. I know. Yeah. Unfortunately, we cannot. Megan, any other thoughts on just what we saw today for the Avs? I mean, really, this is one of the more significant trades they've made in a while. Assets going out. And I tweeted this out. Megan, in 10 days, you completely turned over your goaltending. For all the people that were saying, when are the Avs going to say is enough? We're not even at game 30 yet, and the Avs completely turned over both guys that they started the season with.
I've seen a pretty good consensus in the chat in terms of how they feel about it. But I've seen some concern, like, is it an overpay for a goalie that's just going to hit free agency and is still a little bit unproven? But what else was out there that you feel better about? John Gibson, a lot more money, a lot older, clearly on the back half of his career. I don't know that any other name would have gotten me as excited as Blackwood. Honestly, the reason I wasn't excited about that name sooner was because I didn't think it'd be possible.
I thought it'd be the most expensive for sure.
This feels best case scenario. It does mean giving up Kovalenko as a prospect. That obviously sucks a little bit, but when I look at what their options could have been, I thought a different roster player would have needed to go out to make it possible for a different goaltender coming back. I feel really good about it. There's still a lot Blackwood has to do to make this work too. But when I looked at what else was out there, it felt pretty grim for Colorado and their options for goaltending this year because they were desperate. Let's be real. They were desperate. They didn't move like a desperate team, but they were probably keeping an eye on this all year.
Well, part of the reason why I thought that the cost was going to be so much, because I was sitting there, I was like, well, what team is going to be like, here, Colorado Avalanche, take the one thing missing from you being like an elite Stanley Cup contender today. Just have it.
Oh, Swayman? You want him?
Yeah, just take him. Who
He's
cares?
yours. We'll retain some salary too.
And like somehow through all that sarcastic banter just now, that's kind of what the Sharks did. Just have him. You can have. We'll take a bottom 6 guy if you want to give us that. We'll take it.
They're high on Kobe, which is good because they'll treat him
For
like a
sure.
king. You know, Kovalenko's opportunities came about because the Avs were so injured. He's going to get opportunities on purpose in San Jose. That wasn't meant to be mean.
They're gonna actually mean to play him.
That's
But no, he's gonna get top 6 minutes there, and he's probably gonna get to play with Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini at times. And I think they're going to be very intentional, and they have good reason, I think, to be high on Nikolai Kovalenko. I think being realistic with the window that this Avalanche team is in, with them being serious contenders, and, you know, we talked about what is the Avalanche philosophy right now, right? Like, what's the plan? Because that was what a lot of people were saying when the Wedgwood deal came through was, well, it feels like this team doesn't have a plan. What are they even doing? And I said, look, the plan is you keep your core intact at all costs. You designate your 5 to 7 guys that you say, this is our core, and we will do whatever we have to do to keep them intact. And then you fill in with the best supporting cast that you possibly can. That is the plan, you know? And at the end of the day, Nikolai Kovalenko was always just going to be supporting cast here. He just was. Because he was going to either be a player that they had on the cheap to help continue to make the team competitive, or he was going to be a guy that they used in a situation like this to flip, to get better at a position and bring in more complementary players. I don't necessarily know if I ever thought it was going to be this quick that they were going to.
I didn't think it was going to happen this quick.
Turn around, but hey, look, they took a player who came over from the KHL, former 6th round pick, 7th, right? 6th.
Kovalenko, I have it actually up here. Former 6th.
6th round pick, and you turned him into what you are hoping is a solution in net. A lot of people thought Darcy Kemper was an overpay, kind of like what you were talking about. With
Connor Timmins once upon a time.
Right. You know, that being a little bit of a high cost. No one at all cares or remembers what the cost was to Darcy Kemper, to acquire Darcy Kemper.
Some of us care.
Because you see the rafters, the banner in the rafters up there, and you go, oh yeah, who cares? Now, I will say this from Bagley Sommer, Prishepov will get sent down when Drouin returns. Prishepov has been sent down, and he is at Eagles practice right now.
So, and with Giovanni Smith, he cleared waivers before this. And so there's roster flexibility if they wanted him.
So they might just be playing him tomorrow in Pittsburgh, yeah.
And I think that's intentional on San Jose's behalf to put him on waivers and have him clear ahead of this trade, which points to this being in the works now for at least a 48-hour period.
Well, and you know what's funny? When we talked to Scott Wedgwood,
not back, sorry.
That when they brought in Scott Wedgwood, we all thought that happened like really early in the morning. Scott Wedgwood accidentally let the cat out of the bag and told us that it happened the night before. So I do wonder if this was another one of those things where while the Avs were winning in New Jersey, if Chris McFarland was on the phone working this deal, getting it done and getting all that finalized. Now, the other thing that I will say, and I mentioned this to you about 2 weeks ago. We were on the road, and Chris McFarland is a super nice guy.
Yeah.
Always willing to just stop and chat. And,
if he was traded, we'd be really sad. And
right.
Talk about it very kindly.
Right. I believe we were in Florida. Chris McFarland looked very distressed. Was working the phone a little bit, was picking up his phone, talking to someone, had a couple kind of animated conversations with people around, looked like he was wheeling and dealing. And I remember making note of that, like, I wonder if he was just told the cost on something is more than he wants it to be or something like that. And so it does make you wonder, again, for all the people that have said, like, what is the front office even doing? You do wonder how long have they been working this deal?
I think it's been a while.
I'm with you. We've gone for a little bit over an hour here, Megan. Do you have any other thoughts today before we jump out? We do have to jump on with Chris
Right.
McFarland here in about 20 minutes.
No final thoughts.
No final thoughts. We had other stuff to talk about today.
And we will. It's important, but it's not as time sensitive.
Right. So we had a whole show built for you guys. We're going to talk a little about, we're going to recap last night, but then we were talking about some things going on in the world of hockey right now that we do think are important things to talk about and discuss, and just make sure that the conversation around them is there. But hey, and how about this, Megan? For all the multiple years that you and I were on shows together, how many times did we wrap a show? Thanks for watching. We'd get off, and then the Avs would do something.
The timing was great.
Fantastic. Literally 20 minutes before we went live, I was putting a bow on the rundown, and that was when the first report came out that Blackwood was probably going to Colorado. I shot off a couple texts, and by the time I had heard stuff back, the news was out there, and I think you were like 4 minutes from the studio. I was picking up my stuff to come down here. So it all worked out great for us here today. We are going to jump off so we can jump on with Chris McFarland. So make sure you guys are following along, not only with Guerilla Sports on Twitter, which is at Guerilla Sports _. Make sure you guys are following along, myself and Megan. We will all be on that call, bringing you guys all the latest from Chris McFarland. Do again want to give a big thanks to our great friends over at Trusted American Mortgage. Go to trustedamerican.com right now, or scan that QR code there in the top corner of the screen to see how much they can save you and see if you qualify. They can help you not have to make a mortgage payment till February, Megan, which is very helpful this time of year. She's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. We got Thomas back there behind the glass, making sure you guys can see us and hear us. Almost 4,000 of you guys hanging out with us here today. So thank you so much. We'll be back, and we will be back tomorrow. We'll be right here for the Avs and Penguins. We'll be here in studio. I don't think a regular pod, Megan, will just probably do that, but who knows? There might just be so much news we got to get back up
We'll
here
make
again.
it up somewhere.
We'll figure it out. I'm Jesse. She's Megan. Thanks so much for hanging out, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Guerilla Sports Off Ice. Have a good one.